Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the side event of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, Key Interaction on Gender, Disability, and Climate Change. Before we start our important discussion today, I will inform you the accessible feature we have today and some housekeeping rules. Please kindly put your name, country, organizations in the chat box. This meeting will be recorded. Today we have International Sign Language. For this event, we have live captioning in English, French, and Bahasa Indonesia. Please use CC button at the bottom of your screen. And we also share the link for the card in French in the chat box. For English card, you can access via Zoom, and for full transcript, the link is in the chat. And for Bahasa Indonesia card, please see English card link, then select language, then Indonesia. To view the captioning in large font or color, please refer to the stream text link provided in the chat box for your viewing. You can also adjust your Zoom captioning setting to view the caption in large font. We have simultaneous interpreter today from English to French and English to Bahasa Indonesia. Please kindly use the globe button at the bottom of your screen and choose the language option that you prefer. Today, only panelists, moderator, and international sign will be on camera. You all will be unmuted throughout the event. If you would like to ask a question, kindly add your question in the chat box and not in the Q&A section to ensure that the webinar is accessible for all. Our colleagues will carefully monitor the chat box and collect your questions. Again, I would like to welcome everyone. Thank you for attending this event today. And our agenda today will be starting by welcoming all of you in this webinar, in this important discussions. Then we have opening remarks, and we will have remarks from all the speakers, and then will be followed by question and answer. And then we will ask each speaker to provide the final statement. Before we beginning the session, I would like to thanks to all speakers today. We will have important discussion on the key intersection on gender, disability, and climate change. Today event is organized by the Disability Rights Fund, DRF, and the Disability Rights Advocacy Fund, DRAF, International Disability Alliance, IDA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs Finland, and Global Affairs Canada. It's co-sponsored by UN Women, UNPRPD, the Ford Foundation, and the Global Action on Disability GLAD Networks. My name is Dwi Aryani. I'm the Regional Head of Program for Asia for Disability Rights Fund and Disability Rights Advocacy Fund. Climate change is adversely affecting the life, well-being, and livelihood of the world's poorest, among them disproportionate number of persons with disability, especially women and girls with disabilities. Women and girls with disability face multi-form of discrimination due to the intersectional challenge of ableism and sexism. This event will provide an overview of the impact of climate change toward women and girls with disability, but also highlighted their contribution through their engagement in foster inclusive climate change policy and programs in different levels, from local, national, and global levels. And learning any step being taken by different stakeholders, such as the UN agency, donor agency, organization of persons with disability, and non-government organization working at intersection of climate change, disaster risk reduction, disability, and gender. The Disability Rights Fund and our sister organization, Disability Rights Advocacy Fund, are among the only grantmakers dedicated to funding organizations of disability in Global South. Today, we have moved more than 40 million to over 400 organizations of persons with disability across 39 countries, including many in the Pacific. We are the largest supporter of women with disability, often the first and only funder of the representative of organizations. Our grant making continues to expand in size and diversity. We made our funding flexible to sustain activists with disability and their advocacy during climate-related disaster and other crises. For example, more than 80% of our grant were redirected to address critical gaps in the resources and new advocacy opportunity created by COVID-19. The work of our grantees, including the two organizations represented today as a speaker, demonstrate again and again that women with disability are essential leaders in effort to ensure inclusive response to crisis. Now I would like to introduce our first speaker, Kristen Campbell. Kristen Campbell is the Director General Food Security and Environment in the Global Issue and Development Branch of Global Affairs Canada. She leads the Department International Assistance effort related to sustainable agriculture and food system and the environment. These include thematic policy, multilateral and global programming, and knowledge and advisory service. Ms. Campbell has served in a variety of international development positions covering policy, program, and operations both at Global Affairs Canada and at the Canadian International Development Agency. Christine will outline Global Affairs Canada commitment to gender, disability, and inclusive climate action. Christine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dwi. So hello, my name is Christine Campbell. Let me begin by acknowledging that I'm here speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. So thank you for your kind introduction and for the invitation to participate in this important gathering. I am also pleased to be joined by my fellow panelists who are leading on transformational work in this area. This topic is close to my heart, not only in my current capacity, but as someone who helped negotiate Canada's commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals and its guiding principle of leaving no one behind. Climate change and biodiversity loss pose a fundamental global threat with the potential to worsen some of humanity's greatest challenges. They can lead to climate-related disasters and climate-induced displacement and migration, with additional and significant impacts for security, gender equality, and human rights. And we know that the poorest and most marginalized and vulnerable, including women and girls in their diversity and persons with disabilities, are among the most excluded in any crisis-affected context. We will not be able to achieve the SDGs if we do not address the root causes of climate change in a manner that benefits us all. So this is a key priority for the Government of Canada, which aims to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. Advancing inclusive and feminist climate action is at the center of this work, reflected in Canada's feminist foreign policy and our feminist international assistance policy, including in our programming and advocacy work. These policies commit us to engage and provide international assistance in a manner that is human rights-based, recognizing that all people must enjoy the same human rights, regardless of their identity. In doing so, Canada works with its partners to ensure that persons with disabilities, in particular women and girls, can participate in climate-related planning and policymaking and have equal access to financing, and that these considerations are mainstreamed in national climate change adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk reduction plans. We must acknowledge the challenges faced by those most at risk and put their voices front and center. This is imperative for persons with disabilities, who constitute 15% of the world, or approximately 1 billion individuals. Canada is advancing a number of initiatives to address the nexus of these issues. In June of last year, at the G7 summit, Prime Minister Trudeau announced a doubling of Canada's climate finance to $5.3 billion over 5 years. This funding will support developing countries to mitigate, adapt, and build resilience to climate change. And 80% of projects will integrate gender equality considerations. The Prime Minister has also given a mandate to my minister to provide greater assistance to people with disabilities in developing countries. So in February, at the Global Disability Summit, Canada announced a series of new commitments to strengthen disability inclusive programming, advocacy, and capacity development. So we intend to accomplish this by supporting local disability rights organizations and organizations of persons with disabilities in developing countries, advancing disability inclusion in the paid and unpaid care agenda and with the multilateral development banks, improving disability inclusive data collection and disaggregation, and by formalizing disability inclusion training for our staff. Canada has committed $35 million since 2018 to help 9 countries in the Caribbean to address the gaps in disability inclusion in their disaster risk management plans and to advance gender responsive climate solutions. This commitment also recognizes the disproportionate impacts of climate change faced by small island developing states, as well as barriers to access to finance. And we know the work doesn't stop here, and that we will need to leverage whole of society partnerships to achieve our goals. Through the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, for example, as well as the Women's Voice and Leadership Program, we are providing grants to local organizations to help reduce barriers to finance and drive innovation where it's needed most. So I'll leave it there. Thank you again for the opportunity to participate today, and I look forward to hearing more from my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you also for sharing that strong commitment to support inclusive climate actions, and to remind us that this is also really the inclusive climate action will also contribute to the implementation of sustainable development goals. I will now introduce our second speaker, Uwan. Uwan is Ambassador for Climate Change for Finland and Green Climate Fund board members. Uwan is career diplomat. His professional path has focused on European Union and ASEAN affairs. He has worked at finance mission in Shanghai, Tokyo, Brussels, Sofia, and Madrid. Uwan will be share with us the government of Finland commitment to inclusive climate action and inclusion of persons with disability led by women with disability in decision-making space on inclusive climate action. Uwan, the floor is yours now.
Yes, here we go. Sorry about the technical hassle, and good sunny afternoon from Helsinki. I'm Jan Wahlberg, the Finnish climate ambassador. Very honored and proud to be here today. Both gender and disabilities inclusions, they are at the heart of my climate ambassador work. And that's, I think, was the best things that I experienced during COP26 in Glasgow. The climate crisis affects people and communities in different ways. Women and girls commonly face higher risks and greater burdens from the impacts of climate change. Women's unequal participation in decision-making processes and labor markets compound inequalities and often prevent women from fully contributing to climate-related planning, policymaking, and implementation. As Christine mentioned, persons with disabilities constitute 15% of the world's population, meaning about 1 billion people. Of persons with disabilities, 80% live in developing countries, many of which are severely impacted by the effects of climate change, such as typhoons, floods, drought, extreme heat, and rising sea levels. We know of the disproportionate effects of climate crisis on women and girls and the persons with disabilities. However, how often do we speak about its impact on women and girls with disabilities? I believe not enough. That is why this side event carries such importance. I would like to thank the organizers for bringing attention to the important intersection between gender, disability, and climate change. In order to find inclusive responses, we need to examine more in detail the multiple and intersection forms of discrimination faced by women and girls with disabilities in the context of climate crisis. And to explain you a little bit the Finnish view, I would first like to say that we are actually aiming to be the first fossil fuel advanced economy and be carbon neutral by 2035. And climate change is at the very heart of our foreign policy. We cannot be climate neutral only in Finland. We need to be climate neutral globally. Finland's foreign and security policy is human rights based. This means that we assess the human rights impact in all our foreign policy actions. We take into account the adverse impacts of climate change, not only on the environment, but also, for example, on resources, people's livelihoods, living conditions, and health. As an extension, promoting the rights of women, girls, and people with disabilities is at the heart of our foreign policy and development priorities. Gender equality and disability inclusions are cross-cutting objectives mainstreamed across our work. We are committed to ensuring gradually that 85% of new programs in development cooperation are gender-targeted actions and that all of them are inclusive. Finland was a key country in putting gender conversations to the Paris Agreement in 2015. Finland concentrates in advancing gender and sexual exploitation, abuse and harassment policies in the multilateral climate funds it contributes to. Finland has also actively promoted just transition aspects in carbon pricing, paying special attention to how carbon pricing initiatives affect groups in vulnerable situations. We still work to do in integrating intersectional approaches to multilateral climate action. I find this matter very important, and I want to advance this in the Green Climate Fund as a board member and also in out of my climate work. As a matter of fact, we again have a board meeting next week, and I think it's a very timely discussion, and I can bring the discussion of today to the Green Climate Fund's board next week. Finland was instrumental in ensuring the gender transformative and intersectional approaches as the key principles of EU's Gender Action Plan 3. I believe that we need transformative climate action that looks at the crossroads of inequalities. Together with our partners, Finland is advocating for this approach at the Commission on the Status of Women. We are also exploring opportunities to advance these intersections in the bilateral and regional programs that we fund. So, as a global community, what do we need? Where does our focus need to be? I think it needs to be more on the impacts of climate change through a gender and disability lens. We need to include these aspects across our analysis and theories of change, and increase climate actions in our activities and objectives that advance the rights of women, girls, and persons with disabilities. We must address the discrimination of particular barriers that women and girls with disabilities face. Stigma, stereotypes, and inaccessible environments remain one of the most important barriers towards the inclusion of persons with disabilities in climate action. Lack of accessible information is another barrier. The gender-digital divide is even more accentuated for women with disabilities, who are subject to digital exclusion in many parts of the world. It has been great to see that the Global Action on Disability, GLAD network, puts emphasis on the intersection between gender and disability in the context of this year's Commission on the Status of Women that focuses on climate action. We need to ensure ambitious language in the Commission conclusions, but not only implications, all their full, equal, effective, and meaningful participation. I would argue that the most important thing is to center women and girls with disabilities as part of the solution. This has been Finland's approach for a long time. We have supported both the disabilities and women's movements. Thus, as an international community, we need to continue to strengthen the capacities of women and girls with disabilities and their representative organizations so that they can take part in discussions and decision makings at all levels and access the resources needed to adapt to climate change. Women and girls with disabilities must have a seat at the table when preparing for natural disasters and pandemics, long before they occur. They must be included in programming both as stakeholders and rights holders. Only this way we can ensure full inclusion. This way, I am grateful that we have so many women leaders in this panel today, women with disabilities, Indigenous women with disabilities. I thank you for your attention. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ambassador Jan. I'd remind everyone to please kindly put your question in the chat box. My colleague will monitor the chat box and collect your question, and we will read the question in the Q&A sessions. Now I will introduce our next speakers. Elham Yosefin is the Inclusive Humanitarian Action and Disaster Risk Reduction Advisor in the International Disability Alliance since 2019. Elham is responsible for leading and coordinating the implementation of IDA's strategy to promote and support the effective enforcement of disability-inclusive humanitarian action, respond to forced displacement, peace and security, disaster risk actions. Since lead IDA COVID-19 emergency response in aftermath of global pandemic announcement. Elham is co-chairing the reference group on inclusion of persons, as well as GLAD working group on disability inclusive climate actions. Elham will share with us efforts being carried out by organizations of persons with disability globally on inclusive climate action, including recent efforts during COP26, challenges, achievement, and recommendation, and how we can move forward. Elham, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just want to confirm that everybody can see me and hear me properly. Hello, everyone. As a woman with disability, I'm very happy and very honored to be here with you today. Congratulations to all women around the world, women with disabilities who have been working to achieve equality, participation, and make sure that our views as women with disabilities are being heard by all decision makers, and we are part of decision making. I am going to talk about what we did in COP26 and how is it going forward. Actually, it's very wonderful to speak after Jan because we had wonderful support from the government of Finland to participate in COP26. And I can happily announce that the government of Finland is actually one of the best champions on inclusion of persons with disabilities, including women with disabilities, in global processes and mechanisms on climate action. So if I want to summarize what happened in COP26 and where we are at the moment, the first important achievement, in my opinion, is the official presence of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations in COP26, in COP in general. It is true that from earlier COPs, I think from many, many years ago, we had people with disabilities from different organizations who have paved the way and participated in COPs before. But COP26 was the first time that organizations of persons with disabilities actually 3 of them, including the International Disability Alliance, could acquire observance status and participate in COP with official delegations. So now we are officially observing. This is a message to the global climate action decision makers and leaders that people with disabilities and their organizations are now officially observing. Also, we can see increasing attention by persons with disabilities and their organizations to the topic of climate change. Right now, many organizations of persons with disabilities are eager to participate, and it was great to listen to colleagues from Canada before promising more support for organizations of persons with disabilities so that they can access the resources they need to become more and more active in the area of climate action. The other achievement, as I mentioned, was the support by the government of Finland and also the government of UK and other governments. So we see more and more attention from governments to the issue of inclusion of persons with disabilities, including women with disabilities, in climate action. So, and of course, all of you, I think, heard about the accessibility challenges that was raised by media. And of course, this is not a good news that the venue in COP26 was not fully accessible, but at the same time, it shows that the world is now watching and listening and paying attention to the fact that the first step towards hearing from persons with disabilities in climate conversations is to make sure that they can actually enter and they can access the processes, including COP. So this is another achievement that we had, that climate access to climate processes and mechanisms and venues was highlighted and picked up by media and the general public. We also, for the first time, had published the recommendations and views of how to ensure inclusion of persons with disabilities in climate action, set of recommendations published by International Disability Alliance and Global Action on Disability GLAD Network through the working group on disability inclusive climate action. So I request my colleagues to put the link to access those recommendations in chat. They were published just before the COP26, but of course they're still applicable to COP27 and beyond. So this is a set of recommendations that would be helpful for everybody to check. And then another achievement was formation. We started and we continue the conversation with all stakeholders and actors on disability inclusion to strengthen Disability and Climate Action Caucus, which would be an area for the civil society and organizations of persons with disabilities to get together. We're still working with different actors to make sure that the caucus is being recognized by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. But until that moment and until we can achieve the official recognition, different stakeholders are meeting, are coming together and organizing joint actors. So if anybody is interested to be part of those conversations and join us in what we are trying to do, please feel free to email me. I request my colleague also to put my email address in chat box in case people are interested to connect. Despite all these achievements, what you see if you look at the outcome documents of COP26 still doesn't mention strongly people with disabilities, including women with disabilities. So that's an area that we really need to work to promote for COP27 and beyond. And for that, we really count on support from all stakeholders, governments, especially our sisters and brothers in gender equality and climate action. Because I really believe, and this is all of us main priority, that inclusion should be inclusive. What does that mean? That means that when I am promoting inclusion of people with disabilities, I also need to promote inclusion of women. And the other way, when they are promoting inclusion of women, it doesn't make sense not to include people with disabilities, because inclusion is not going to take place unless everybody, all the marginalized groups are included. And when we talk about women with disabilities, of course, they sit at the intersection of being women and being people with disabilities. So this even brings us more and more together. So for COP27, for COP28, we hope that the outcome documents include stronger reference to persons with disabilities to make sure that climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and resilient building processes and decisions is inclusive of and accessible for people with disabilities, including women with disabilities. And we hope that COP27 and beyond, all other mechanisms of climate action are open and accessible for persons with disabilities, including women with disabilities. I just want to conclude by mentioning that I heard and I was reading that if we continue with this pace on including women in climate processes, we will not achieve gender equality in climate action before 2068. So it's not hard for you to imagine what's the situation of including women with disabilities. However, I have the great news that in our work of including of enhancing disability inclusion in climate action, we are quite gender inclusive. So for example, the official side event that we organized in Blue Zone for climate action and disability was quite women dominated, and we had more female panelists than male panelists. And also in our group and delegations, women are quite actively participating. So
thank you.
I want to thank you so much, everybody, for your participation here, and looking forward to the rest of the meeting today. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Elham, for highlighting the achievement of the advocacy effort at global levels. But yeah, there is a lot of achievement, but there is also still remaining a lot of challenges for women and girls with disability to participate in the decision-making process on climate actions. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Pratima Guru. Pratima Guru is an academic activist from Nepal. She has worked on issues related to women, indigenous people, disability rights, and has been remarkable in bridging multiple marginalized identities within an intersectional lens. She is a founding member and currently General Secretary of Indigenous Person with Disability Global Network and National Indigenous Disabled Women Association Nepal. She has been engaging in climate change issue, integrating gender disability and indigeneity issue at grassroots level since 2017. Pratima will share with us the importance of the participation of indigenous women with disability in the climate action at national, regional, and global levels. Pratima, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dewey, and thank you to all the organizer. Very honored and very humbled to be in this rich discussion. Indigenous greetings. I am Pratima Guru, an indigenous woman with disability from Nepal, and represent National Indigenous Disabled Women Association in Nepal, which works for the protection and promotion of the rights of indigenous women with disabilities. National Indigenous Disabled Women Association has been working on the economic, educational, social, cultural, and environmental justice from grassroots to the global level. Our journey started from the COP15 Paris, where we had an opportunity to do negotiation, hold several meetings and side events, and media briefing with member states and other stakeholders to include the word indigenous people and people with disabilities. And it was historical. The Paris Agreement has been historical to all people with disabilities, and we were able to share the post-earthquake situation at that moment. The COP15, after the COP15, we have been able to work developing a comprehensive intersectional policy because of the multiple identities that we hold as a woman, as an indigenous woman, as a woman with disabilities, and indigenous women with disabilities. So 4 different multiple marginalized identities added to climate change impacts, further exacerbated in a compounded and intersectional forms, which are not the part of discussion in the state policies. We have been framing such policies with an intersectional lens at the grassroots level. Our lived experience highlights that climate change impacts are in our daily lives and realities. Today, we have floods, droughts, landslide, regular monsoons, and our mountains and glaciers are melting. However, the adverse impact of having these regular phenomena for us as a person with disabilities are never debated. Today, as indigenous people, our access to forest, land, territories are denied by our state policies on the one hand. On the other hand, we are losing our productive lands. Our lands have become barren due to our excessive pesticides and climate change impacts. Data shows that 80% indigenous people with disabilities have no land, and only 1.1% indigenous people with disabilities rely on the forest, which means that today we are having hunger, starvation, lack of wash facilities, livelihood challenges, nutritious food, water, poverty, and increasing prevalence rate of being disability, which is higher in our communities. When this is further compounded to women with disabilities, the situation is more adverse. Today, 54 million indigenous people with disabilities globally and 1.3 million indigenous people with disabilities in my country, we are losing our identity, our biodiversity, the cosmovision of collective life of indigeneity. And we are at the risks, and we are in the front line of all these climate change impacts. And our community people, as a people with disability and as indigenous people with disabilities, we are not aware about all these impacts and also the climate change justice and mechanisms. Nepal lies in the 12th position in the risks of climate change impact and disasters out of 125 countries. We are 6th polluted countries among the world. Climate change impacts our daily lives in multiple forms and in multiple aspects, which are very complex and multidimensional to describe. So it has really been crucial for us to frame our own narratives. And that is where we are collecting evidences from the ground. We are conducting several meetings, workshops like this, having dialogue with different stakeholders at the regional and at the national and global level. And this has been really instrumental by the support of Disability Advocacy Right Fund with the strategic partnership, supporting the intersectional approach and reaching the underrepresented groups like indigenous people with disabilities on the ground. And we would like to have such kind of collaboration in all across the world. The study conducted by National Indigenous People with Disabilities highlight that we face programmatic, attitudinal, psychological, multiple identity, structural, and environmental barriers due to the climate change at the grassroots levels. But these situations are not addressed at the global climate discussion and intervention. We experience that there is a huge gap of global discourse addressing the local realities. We also realize that there is lack of funding support and meaningful participation of people with disabilities who are in the front line of climate change. There is a much effort of investment required urgently to address. So we are working with women, indigenous people's constituency, disability, and civil society organizations working on climate justice from national, regional to global level, framing the agenda of gender, disability, and indigeneity from an intersectional lens. Today, we realize there is lack of data, evidence, and capacity building, sensitization, and collective collaborations, and framing an intersectional lens in climate change discourse. At the same time, I would also like to conclude my intervention that 6% indigenous people of the world is contributing 80% biodiversity of this planet and the Mother Earth, We are custodians and addressing the climate mitigation and being resilient through our traditional knowledge and skills and systems in different way at our community level. But these need to be acknowledged, respected, promoted, invested at all levels, inspiring and ensuring that no one is left behind, and also trying to ensure that nothing about us without us. I thank you for listening me, and I will take if there are any questions from the participant. Thank you, Dewey. Over to you.
Thank you, Pratima. Thank you also for highlighting the importance on to ensure the full participation of Indigenous women with disability in the climate action policy and program, and also the share that it is very important to have a collaboration between different stakeholders to ensure this. Now I would like to again reminding everyone, please put your question in the chat box. You can also ask the question in French or in Bahasa, and we will collect your questions. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Maria Un. Maria Un is disability rights activist with over 14 years of professional experience working with grassroots organization of persons with disability in Indonesia, and has been working to promote the rights of Indigenous women with disabilities since 2016. She has been actively engaged in different movements, such as the women movement and climate justice. Her work has focused on promoting the rights of women and girls with disability, inclusive education, increased participation of women and girls with disability, including Indigenous women and girls with disability in the decision-making process, and budgetary advocacy. She is the chair of the Indonesia Association of Women with Disability of South Sulawesi branches. Maria Un will share with us the role of women with disability in decision-making process in climate action at the community level and recommendation to support women with disability and their representative organizations. Maria Un, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Dwi. Good evening from Indonesia, everyone. My name is Maria Uwan. I am representing Indonesian Association of Women with Disabilities, and it is a great honor to me to be involved in this great opportunity to share about the role of women with disabilities in climate change decision making. For 5 years since 2016, with the support of DRF and DRIF, HWDI South Sulawesi has strengthened Indigenous people with disabilities, especially women, to have confidence and knowledge about their rights as persons with disabilities and Indigenous people, so that they are able to participate in decision-making process. Our activities include conducting training on CRPD, CIDO, and CRC, training on community organizer, and training on lobbying and advocacy. We carried out this process into district in South Sulawesi, namely Maros and district and Sidrap. Through this strengthening, Indigenous women with disabilities finally know their rights and have confidence to participate in decision-making processes in development, as well as decisions related to climate change. In Sidrap district, young Indigenous women with disabilities are actively involved in village discussion about the impact of climate change on Indigenous people, especially women with disabilities. This activity is participatory research carried out together with Indigenous people, including women with disabilities, regarding the impact of climate change that has been experienced, identifying possible impacts, identifying potential climate change in and around their territory, identifying adaptation and mitigation strategies carried out by the Indigenous community, including women with disabilities related to climate change. Meanwhile, in Maros district, Indigenous women with disabilities are actively involved in the village development decision-making process through the Musrenbang Desa, which proposes empowerment for persons with disabilities through the Dana Desa. Indigenous people with disabilities are also involved in drafting the Philippines Medium-Term Development Plan and overseeing it until the issue of disability is included in the document for 2019 to 2025. In addition to participating in the Philippines Musrembang, indigenous women with disabilities are also delegated to represent their Philippines at the Musrembang for the sub-district and district level. As a result of their advocacy, the Maros district government has held thematic Musrembang for women, children, and persons with disabilities in 2021 and 2022. Indigenous people with disabilities also participate in the formation of regional regulation by proposing and overseeing the principle of local wisdom and the issues of indigenous people with disabilities being included in the local regulation of Maros Regency regarding persons with disabilities. And indigenous person with disabilities also has elected as a member of the Philippines Consultative Board. Recommendation to improve the situation of indigenous women with disabilities in society, including 1, the state to take action to protect indigenous persons with disabilities, especially women, all forms of discrimination, including criminalization in the management of natural resources and other resources in their areas. This action needs to be taken because the livelihoods of indigenous people, including persons with disabilities, are gardening, farming, and processing natural resources. 2, the state should ensure the full participation of indigenous women with disabilities in decision-making processes, including in climate action policies and programs. 3rd, the importance of support for indigenous women with disabilities to better understand climate change issue, and vice versa, those who work on climate change issues must also understand disability issues. 4, the collective rights of indigenous women with disabilities must be stated in the regulation and policies made for indigenous people, women, and persons with disabilities. And 5, mainstreaming the issue of indigenous women with disabilities in indigenous peoples and women's issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Now I will introduce our next speaker, Gerald Khabib. Gerald Khabib is an inclusive development, human rights, disability inclusion, and gender expert. He is the senior advisor and team leader for gender equality and disability inclusion at UN Women Headquarters in New York. Prior to this, he was senior role of law policy advisor and chief of Asia Pacific section with UN Women Headquarters. Among others, he led the development of UN Women's approach to inclusive, short and triangular cooperation and disability inclusions. Manjura will talk about CSW66 priorities, achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policy and program, and how this related to disability. Manjura, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think it has been a very rich discussion, and I'm glad that I'm focusing specifically on CSW and its interaction with a number of other intergovernmental processes. Because today's discussion, as moderator you have highlighted at the beginning, addressing the key interaction, and these 3 interactions are critical: gender, disability, and climate change. And we have heard from our panel, co-panel members about the importance and mutual reinforcement of this. One of our greatest shared challenges is, of course, climate change, which is also the priority theme for the 66 Commission on the Status of Women. Now, I want to reiterate at the beginning UN Women's firm commitment to gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity. Today in the panel discussion, we heard different diversity, already, but there are many other diversity that we haven't spoken or touched today, and that is not possible for one single event to cover every spectrum of diversity within. The implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the 2030 Agenda, our commitment to that, as well as, of course, Paris Agreement and other frameworks that govern sustainable development, climate change, and the environment and disaster risk reduction. Now, the climate change impacts every corner of our globe, of course, and threatens peace, food security, and sustainable development, all pillars of the United Nations, whether from the Pacific to the Arctic. As with all crises, climate change also exacts its highest price from women and girls, especially from those who are already being left behind, women and girls with disabilities. Female-headed households, those in rural areas who cannot access land without access to finance, including young girls who must go further to fetch water in times of drought and missing school to do so. And the list goes on, actually. Now, member states have already made many important commitments to gender equality through multilateral environment agreements such as Rio Convention and Sendai Framework. I was listening in the general discussion in the CSW. On the 17th March, a number of member states, I'm just giving you a flavor for the benefit of this discussion. For example, Switzerland's decision to phase out nuclear power was taken by a majority female government. Singapore announced the establishment of the first women's society to focus on concerted gender action to ensure responsible consumption and production patterns in line with Singapore's Green Plan. Cyprus has put in place national action plan and strategies that include provision, among others, for the participation of women, both in the development and implementation of climate action plans. Gabon adopted a national plan to promote green production. Kyrgyzstan has taken gender-responsive measures to climate change adaptation. Mozambique is committed to mainstreaming gender and engaging women in the formulation of gender-responsive climate change policies. Now, these are all good examples. These are all progress in the right direction. But one thing, when you look at them, this is looking at one aspect of intersectionality. And today we spoke about the challenges of multiple elements of intersectional approach. And there is the gap, whether it is member states, whether it is private sector, whether it is United Nations as a system, and also all other civil society partners. So I think that is where this event is particularly focusing and a light on. So we must leverage women's skills in managing the conservation and sustainable use of natural resources. But we also have to look beyond only the one dimension. There are multiple dimensions. For example, the young women with disabilities, they are contributing to the global climate movement. We heard today from the panelists, indigenous women with disabilities, they have offered their solution from their lived experiences. We must listen and we must act. Now, currently, women and girls' rights, especially those with disabilities, their priorities and needs are systematically overlooked by climate, environmental, and disaster risk policies and programs. For example, only a third of national energy frameworks from 137 countries include gender consideration. And most of them did not even mention about specific challenges that women and girls with disabilities face. So it is always the details that creates the challenges for you to understand that our coverage is not enough. And as much as we love to say leaving no one behind, we are actually leaving women with disabilities behind. Many policy solutions, and many service center and service schemes that we are developing in the capital or outside in the provincial towns. So that is something I'm sort of raising a flag in this discussion, taking advantage of your presence and this event. We know that gender responsive, disability inclusive climate action is essential to address the underlying causes of vulnerability to climate challenge, including environmental and disaster risk. But we must develop research capacity and collect data. Data means disaggregated data by gender and disability. What we are observing that lack of capacity at the national level, at the subnational level, particularly at the local level. Therefore, many of our data are not necessarily quality assured, and there are, of course, lack of data. Now, all these demands a fresh look at the challenges for accessibility and inclusion in ensuring full and informed participation of women and girls with disabilities. One is we have lack of data, one is we have lack of capacity. And then we have also, because of these two important gaps, we also develop a policy development system which are often not inclusive enough and not accessible. My colleague from IDA did mention that inclusion has to be inclusive, and I agree with her, because if you cannot design inclusion in a systemic way and inclusive way, then your inclusion would be would not be a one-stop shop covering every aspect of exclusion and opportunity to exclude different groups. And I will close my intervention in terms of looking at how can we strengthen not only development paradigm, but also peace and security paradigm, and for which we not only have to include policy development process in terms of inclusiveness, but also looking at the implementation and looking at how to evaluate them well. Can we start this inclusive planning and implementation together from the beginning in all relevant sectors? Let us walk the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monjural. Thank you also for highlighting the importance of inclusive should be inclusive and ensure that women with disabilities should participate in decision-making process at all levels, from the local, sublocal, national, regional, global levels. Now, we're gonna open the floor for question and answers. I will remind again everyone, please put your question in the chat box. You can put your question in French or in Bahasa. And now I get my first questions from the chat. So I will read the questions. The first question is for Jen and Christine. What is Finland and Canada doing to specifically address gender and disability inclusion at the intersection of climate and disaster risk reductions, or DRR? So let me start with Finland. Ian, could you please answer these questions? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the very good and timely question. Actually, today is the World Meteorological Day, and I think early action, early warning, and what happens in climate has to do a lot with disabilities inclusion. The World Meteorological Organization in Geneva, they share actually their office with UN Disaster Risk Reduction Office. So I think these teams are interlinked, and the head of the World Meteorological Organization is a Finn, Petteri Talas, and we do work quite closely these topics. He's coming to a climate meeting in Lahti in 10 days, and this will be definitely one of the discussions we are doing. Just to give an example that I think the most concrete way I work disaster risk reduction has to do with the early action, early warning. And I think it's very important that in my work, I take into account disabilities inclusion and all the marginalized groups like we have been discussing today. Thanks.
Thanks, Jens. And now, Christine, could you respond to these questions? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And just to say that this whole conversation has been so exciting. so to start, again, just to say I'm Christine Campbell. This is a great question, and maybe it gives me an opportunity to drill down a little further on a few key initiatives that I mentioned in my opening. So Canada has committed funding for projects that address the intersection of all these issues, specifically in the Caribbean. So we have $20 million that's being provided to the Canada Caribbean Resilience Facility, which will be used to assess gaps in gender equality and disabilities inclusion within disaster risk management plans. and it will be targeted towards sectors most impacted, such as infrastructure and agriculture. We're also providing $15 million to the Climate Change Action for Gender Sensitive Resilience project to help integrate gender equality and human rights-based approaches into climate adaptation and environmental management frameworks, and to support persons with disabilities to access DRR support. As part of this funding, for example, we are working with women and girls and persons with disabilities in St. Lucia to develop commercial solar-powered aquaponics systems and a storage and processing unit. So this will help support their livelihoods. We heard mention of that in the earlier conversation. So livelihoods being so important, and will contribute to increased food security on the island. We also have in place, I had mentioned before, the Women's Voice in Leadership program. This initiative, it supports over 400 women's rights, local grassroots organizations, and lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex groups to advance women's rights, including for women and girls and persons with disabilities. I used to be responsible for that program. So another one of those issues I care about, and it's a good program. Organizations, I know the issue of financing has come up. Organizations can apply for the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives to fund small-scale, high-impact projects. The average size is about $27,000, and it really gets at those challenges that some of you have identified on the ground. And lastly, and it sounds like a list of what Canada's doing, but there is one more I want to highlight, and that's we've recently announced $15 million in climate finance to enable Indigenous peoples and organizations in Canada to support Indigenous peoples in developing countries to implement climate action initiatives. And that one is going to be developed obviously in close consultation with Indigenous peoples. So we're very excited about that. And I do know that links will be shared and are in the chat. I'm hoping that there's great opportunity for everyone to get engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And I saw that the resources already shared in the chat. And thank you, everyone. Also, I know in the chat, from the chat, that a lot of people share also some informations. Now, I would like to read the next questions. To this question, it goes to Pratima and Maria. In some section of society, people with disability are kept away from the public space by their own family. What strategies have been used to ensure such persons with disability take advantage of effort to include them? Pratima, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Dewey, for this question and to the participants. So for me, I would say that there is a huge gap of sensitization at the community level when it comes to marginalized groups like women with disabilities and other types of impairment groups. The parents, the society members, and also people with disabilities themselves need to be sensitized, and the human rights approach is yet to be realized on the ground. We still have a charity-based approach, and that is why persons with disabilities and their family members tend to basically keep people with disabilities in the institutions or organizations, and which is not a right-based approach. And for me, I would say that there is a need for building the capacity and also sensitization, enabling and safe, meaningful participation of people with disabilities and their family members. That has to be part of those discussion when we talk about inclusive disability inclusion. This is the first thing. The second thing is there also need to be the supportive, assistive systems and support services for people with disabilities and their family members. And when it comes to the developing countries like Nepal, we hardly receive those kind of support system. So I would really encourage that those kind of support system will enable to ensure the meaningful participation of people with disabilities and their family members. And by doing that, this can also highlight that people with disabilities can be and they are contributors to the family and the society they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratima. Maria, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you very much. Many parents and families of persons with disabilities do not have a good understanding and also feel confused in how or the steps that need to be taken to support persons with disabilities. And for this reason also, besides strengthening persons with disabilities themselves, strategies are needed to increase family support as the main support system to persons with disabilities, like parenting skills and sensitization to persons with disabilities, parents of persons with disabilities. It's very important. Collaborating with other CSO and involving government because it is the government responsibility. And in addition, awareness campaign related to persons with disabilities needed to be carried out continuously. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Now the next question for Monjural. What UN woman has been taking initiative for the inclusion of women and girls with disability in climate actions?
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just a minute. Thank you very much. Now, we are doing a couple of things, particularly three things. One is we are looking at a broader intersectionality approach, and I will share the resources for you to look at as well. This has been published recently, our Global Intersectionality Toolkit. Secondly, we are also looking at how all the climate action, particularly at the international level, intergovernmental level, also has the elements of both gender, primarily gender, of course, and then now we are looking at the intersectionality. After looking at the gender and climate, then the climate action is one of the key priority for our work. And third, now we are looking at increasingly more OPD and CSO consultations. And consulting means also understanding the challenges they're facing. It is impossible for a UN entity to build capacity at the deep local level, but how can we really ensure that our national counterparts understand the critical challenges of the capacity development? And capacity development, we also want to get away with the traditional training approach. We would like to look at how can we really ensure provision for mentorship. We are twinning exercise across organization, north and south, south and south. And I think it is critical that we promote South-South and triangular cooperation in this, so that some of the member states who have better knowledge, they can share across. And likewise, we also as a UN, we can promote the triangular cooperation where it is not difficult for multiple regions to come together. And that is one of the role we are playing gradually together with all other UN partners. So these are the three new approach. I would not call new in the sense of newness, but it is in terms of our operational priorities. And the intersectionality comes in a timely moment because leaving no one behind is easier said than done. And we are looking at the lack of consistency across member states, across UN agencies in shaping leaving no one behind in real programming principles. That is unfortunately hasn't been happening well till now. We are in 2022 now. We have 8 more years before 2030. And obviously there would be new goals post 2030. So it's a critical juncture and critical time for all of us to work together on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manjura. Now from the question from at the global levels, we go to local level, a question for Ibu Maria. So what are the challenges in mainstreaming inclusion in climate change in Sidrap district?
Yeah, the challenge of our work in CDRAP, indigenous communities is far from the city. I mean, to go to CDRAP, it took a long time to reach indigenous persons with disabilities there. And lack of education, mostly lack of education of indigenous women with disabilities. We still face, they still face many discrimination in the community, and it is a big challenge for us to reach them, to ensure and to involve them in the activities conducted by our organization in CSW. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So just to give a background, CSW is one district in South Sulawesi province, Indonesia, where Maria and her organization working to ensure that indigenous women with disability is taking part in the decision-making process on the climate actions. Now I would like to read the next questions, and this is for you, Pratima. I think what strategy have been used to ensure such persons with disability take effort to include them? Are there any partnership that can help such institutional disconnect?
Can you repeat the question, Dewey?
Yeah. So some persons with disability have been kept by their family, but are there any partnership that can help such institutional disconnect to support persons with disability to be included in the community, particularly from the marginalized group?
So to include people with disabilities from the marginalized groups, I would say that the inclusive and human rights and intersectional approach is one of the strategies that we have been working at the grassroots level. And I highly recommend and request to all the member states, the UN agencies, the Organization of People with Disabilities, and other development partners also to include and to address these strategies, not only on the paper, but also at the ground with practice. This is what I just wanted to highlight. The second thing is about lack of evidences and documentations, because most often we are being asked for the best practices, but at the same times, we are also not able to bring the challenges and the difficulties that we face in integrating at the community level. And this is where the meaningful participation of people with disabilities lies. So I would also like to recommend that the people with disabilities need to provide equitable, meaningful, safe, and accessible enabling environment. And this enabling environment is not only to people with disabilities themselves, but also to their family members to integrate in the society. So these are the crucial things that we need to address. But at the same time, community sensitization and awareness raising, developing the capacity of people with disabilities, including their parents, are very much crucial. And we also would like to have that people with disability, there is a need of investment to bring people with disabilities who are from the marginalized groups to be champion, to frame their narratives, and to have a debate around inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratima. The next questions. Is there any example of private financing for inclusive climate action that the panelists would like to share? So anyone would like to answer these questions? Maybe Monjural, Pratima, Maria, or Jan, or Christine, would you like to answer?
I would, maybe I will, if I may, allow.
Yes, please.
Okay. Can you see me or? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I would not give the specific example of only private sector, because this is an area growing and a number of private sector entities are very active. But I just want to focus on the public-private partnership is growing around climate change. And often we don't prioritize those. And it's also happening around the banks, the new and emerging banks and the regional banks who are engaging with and building partnership with private sector. So I would urge OPDs, particularly organizational persons with disabilities, to be in touch. And we made this appeal to also regional banks, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, regional economic commissions, and then private sectors, active private sectors who are part of this cohort, to reach out to OPDs and organizational persons with disabilities and women with disabilities, so that the climate finance, whether it is green climate finance or other funding opportunities, or regional banks are also promoting number of funding opportunities, can reach out to them. And there is an element of strong capacity development are part of this climate finance as well, because our experience from number of private sector driven climate finance is often there's no element of capacity building. Therefore, a number of very, very sort of routine queries are not made often because of the lack of capacity, lack of awareness and knowledge. And as a result, in the final consideration, many of the OPDs are not considered for climate finance as well. And that is an unfortunate reality, and we need to address that with a pragmatic dose of capacity development and outreach at both ends. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Manjura. I think that was the last questions we have. It was really a rich discussion that we have, but we also have limited times. So now I would like to invite to all speakers today to give their final statements. We can start from Christine. Christine? You are still mute.
There, can you hear me now? You may not be able, sorry, you may not be able to see me. Technical gremlins have arrived. But so, look, just very briefly, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate today. This was a fascinating discussion and one that I'll be able to take forward. I'll engage with my team and see if there's things that we should be doing differently as we go forward. But if I could just re-emphasize one message, it would be that persons with disabilities, in particular women and girls, are agents of change, leading on groundbreaking initiatives worldwide. And it's only by ensuring their effective, inclusive, and meaningful participation that we're going to be able to advance solutions. So these discussions today and elsewhere, they are extremely important. So looking forward to continuing the conversation later. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Ambassador Yan, would you like to go next?
My voice is up. Yes, now I think I have the camera as well. Is it so? Yes, sorry about the technical difficulties. Excellent discussion. So like Christine, I want to give a warm thanks to everybody. I really gave me a lot of ideas. Pratima, you said multiple marginalized identities. Wanted you also on that we need to discuss every spectrum of diversity. Finland is a member of Human Rights Council in Geneva this year. And I think these are the topics also we want to take there intersectionally. Not only climate change, but disabilities, gender, youth, democracy, and indigenous people. And also I thank Ilham for reminding me of the job we have ahead from COP26 to COP27. Just a second. And lastly, I would like to say that we know that we have learned that women and girls with disabilities may be sidelined in both the women's and disability movements if we do not pay due attention to power imbalances and promote equal participation of all. Thus, it is important to support, in particular, the organizations of women with disabilities in all their diversity. And I think that what is a key priority for Finland, and that's what we are doing.
Thank you, Ambassador Uwan. Now, Elham.
Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation and all the input. I just want to conclude by highlighting the fact that we really need to also work on documentation of impact of climate change on women with disabilities, especially older women with disabilities, young women with disabilities, and women with disabilities from other underrepresented groups. Indigenous women with disabilities was quite highlighted today, but it's never enough, and we always can highlight more to make sure that the impact of climate change on all diverse group of women with disabilities is being documented, being highlighted, the data is collected and disaggregated, and also making sure that they can participate in women movement for climate action and people with disabilities movement on climate action. So I reach my hands to my feminist sisters and brothers who are working on inclusion of women on climate action, and welcome them on disability work, and think we are stronger together. Thank you so much, and looking forward to future achievements.
Thank you, Elham. Pratima?
For the concluding observation and recommendation, I would just recommend 3 points. We recommend for a just, equitable, meaningful, safe, accessible, enabling, and intercultural inclusive response to climate crisis, to address, to listen to our unheard, untold, undocumented stories of people with disabilities and women with disabilities, including Indigenous women with disabilities, within our constituency and beyond, and by all the member states. We also reiterate for the targeted intervention with fair and equitable climate finance. And by saying this, I would also like to highlight the last thing, that our participation at all levels are crucial. Today, we need to be on the table to collectively discuss when the decisions are made on our lives by reaching the farthest far with the triangular relationship among the right holders, duty bearers, and other development partners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pratima. Maria?
The participation and support of all parties is needed to improve the situation of Indigenous women with disabilities in society. Therefore, the support of donors in gender, climate change, and disability issues by ensuring that resources are available to assist organization of persons with disabilities, especially at the grassroots level, to advocate for the linkage of issues related to disability, gender, and climate change, especially for OPDs led by women with disabilities, is important. I thank you very much for the opportunities, and good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Maria. Monjural?
I'm just starting my video, but it is not unable. Can you open my video, please? Yeah. Thank you very much. As I said, multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination recognize the indispensable, I would say, role of civil society, feminist groups, women-led organizations and movements, OPDs, and organizations led by women with disabilities, and women's human rights defenders. Now, the impacts of climate change on women with disabilities must be documented because we are not seeing enough evidence. We are telling this, we are also highlighting the importance of intersectional approach, but in terms of economic terms, deep policy impact, and also impact at the community level, we are not seeing a lot of evidence base. And I think there we need to work together, join our hands and work together. This was similar in the post-Beijing world when we're looking for impact on the lives of women and we're not finding enough evidence base. Now we have a lot of evidence in terms of women, but we have to focus on also women and gender intersectional area and other intersectional area that we spoke about. And that would be my plea today to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all speakers today in these important discussions we have today. And before we close the event today, I would like to encourage everyone the importance to raise awareness with the government and humanitarian actors about the importance of meaningful participation of women with disability in every phase and decision-making process regarding climate action. If you have resources or expertise to offer, focus your generosity on supporting women with disability and other under-resourced groups to become active right defenders, mitigating climate change at all levels. It's clear that if we provide the resources to women in all their diversities, they will take the lead. And the resulting of that is world will be more equitable, climate resilience, and place for all of us to live. So now we close the event today. Thank you very much for all your participation. Again, I would like to thanks to our speaker, participant, our international chain, interpreters, our closed captioning, and all our colleagues from DRF teams and IDA teams. And please check DRF and IDA website and staying connected with our works. And we will also send you the recording of today's event. So thank you, everyone. Be safe and take care.